Okay.
Hi guys. Thanks for joining us. Really very grateful for the audience and joining us on a weekly basis. The purpose of this call is to get to grips with what's going on and the new normal, and overcome the obstacles to taking new action, but also to create a quorum to promote that thinking and also to create new partnerships, new relationships to make this happen. So this is an action-orientated call. It's also open and honest discussion about what's unfolding. Our qualification, I guess, in terms of being here, the Winning Thinking team have led 200 company turnarounds, either in exec roles or independent roles, to deliver maximum bang for buck. And we're all about delivering immediate results. And we've actually got that down to pretty fine art of a one-day program, which we'll share some insight into, because it'd be stupid not to. And the unique thing, which I think is very relevant to that, is we never use external cash. So we always get businesses to cash. And so this whole thing around debt, we'll cover that off a bit later. I think the common link with the current situation is the extreme uncertainty and the extreme challenge. And as well, we are providing as broad a perspective to the guys on the call as possible. So I'm very pleased to welcome Tom. I haven't seen Tom for a while. Tom is what I describe as being a FMCG food CEO, and really look forward to understand what Tom's view of what the unfolding challenge looks like, particularly in food, which is very much, and I love retail because it's very much the way when the rubber hits the road. So really looking forward to what Tom's got to say. I think in summary, what we're unraveling is that survival depends upon getting to new action, and as well as doing the right thing, profit and relationships. I think I'd just add a caveat there, because profit is a bit of a misnomer. I'd actually add a caveat to say cash. And I'll describe in my talk about cash, which I think is increasingly important. And then David Allen is going to talk about what does new action look like, and David McLean was going to talk about what's stopping us from taking new action. But actually, David's got some technical challenges, which in true turnaround style we're handling. So I might cover off some of those points myself. So. And there's another item which I'd like to add to the agenda, which is picking up a point. It's all very well having the skills if we're not taking new action. So I'd like to challenge the people on the call, and include myself as well, to make a single observation and an action, and actually add that to the comments box at the end, please. Because skills without action without new action is utterly useless, and we can use that to build on. But just to make sure that. And I was always the person at school who never did what they were told. So please don't follow my steer. But I hope that might just raise the bar a little bit. So anyway, over to you, Tom. Really, really pleased that you're joining us, and really big welcome. So look forward to what you've got to say.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the panel today. So look forward to our conversation and our discussion. Before we start talking about new action and what might stop us actually from taking it, and some observations I have in that respect, I just would like to put the food supply chain a bit in perspective, so that people know where I come from. I would say that the food supply chain has been put to the test quite severely over the last couple of months. But also that supply chain has passed that exam, as we all, none of us has gone hungry. Actually, quite a few people has had too many calories over the last couple of months. And food was there, food was available. We've had some issues with toilet paper in the beginning of this lockdown, but in all fairness, most businesses have been able to cope and have been able to supply us with food. And everyone is always talking about cars and just in time and the iPhone with all the different parts coming from all over the world. But actually, I think the unsung hero of the of 21st century is the food supply chain. The size of the supply chain has actually tripled since 1970. It's roughly 10 trillion at the moment, while at the same time the world population only doubled. So you can sort of see, the success, if you like, in that respect. Farming is done often just around the corner, if you like, but the supplies like seed and fertilizer, machines and so on, fuel, if you like, it all comes from far ahead and far afield. Food sector is roughly 10% of global GDP, and about 1.5 billion people are working in that industry. So tremendously important. If you just look at exports, the growth has been sixfold in the last 3 decades, and today roughly 4/5, 80% of the 8 billion mouths that are fed actually by food that is partly imported. So it is a tremendous success story, if you like. And if you then look at the UK itself, the figures of imported food do range from 50 to 80%. It is actually closer to 80 because, for example, tea is packed in the UK, but it's grown obviously in India, Sri Lanka, somewhere else. And if you take all that into consideration, all the ingredients, almost 80% of the UK food that we consume is actually imported. And very well-known staples that everyone loves, like bacon. 55% of bacon, 80% is imported, mainly from Holland and Denmark, if you like. Chips, French fries, over 50% is imported from Holland and Belgium. And these are everyday products that the Brits, like and love to consume. And I think, that's sort of the field, if you like. And I think the biggest threat to that supply chain, to that success, is in fact governments that might take all sort of action and start, building walls and import levies and all sort of stuff. You hear it all the time now. We have to grow closer to home and we have to produce all sort of, but we can't. And the world population will grow roughly with another 3 billion in the next 2 decades. And all these people need to be fed and all these mouths need to be filled. And the success story, if you like, of that food supply chain just needs to continue. But I think good news is, to sort of close that part of my introduction, the good news is that it has been tested severely and none of us got hungry. So I think the food supply chain, A+ from my perspective.
Right.
So that's just the scene, if you like. Then maybe what happened under COVID and what needs to be done in terms of sort of action and new action, if you like. First of all, it takes roughly, on average, 66 days to change the behavior of consumers, right? So the lockdown obviously has been over 100 days. So a lot of the new behavior that we do see now is actually here to stay. And you do hear a lot, executives and boards talking about, we don't know yet what is happening, we have to wait, we have to see. That is actually not true. We know what is going to happen for 80-90%. We can already start discussing, deciding even where we want to go to with our businesses. I think, if you talk about individuals, how do you get out of this lockdown period? You either are a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk, right? So people start exercising, people start eating, and people are just, sort of drunking and don't know really where to go. It's sort of the same with the businesses. There are 3 businesses, the type of businesses, if you like, emerging from this situation, right? You're either a hunk and you're growing because you happen to be in food delivery or packaging or whatever, and you see your business 2-fold, 3-fold, and you're in good shape. Or you're a chunk, and it means you have to look at you're too heavy. You have to look at your cost structure. You have to look at your cash and the issues we will discuss later. You just have to start restructuring. But you know today whether you're a hunk or a chunk. The only people that still don't know really where to go, they're sort of looking around and say, what are the drunk? And the drunk actually will have to go into transformation mode, because if they don't change anything, they will end up in the chunk basket. And if they be able to, to take new action, come up with new strategies, new methods, to look at the market, they might end up, in the hung basket, and that's where you want to be as a business. And my observation is that a lot of these things you know. You simply know. I buy now milk. It's directly delivered from the supplier in a glass bottle by an electrical van to my door twice a week. It's not more expensive. It is there when I want it, and it's high quality. Its provenance is everything I want. Why would I now change back to going to the supermarket, buy 2.5 pint cans and start carrying these bloody things home? I will not do it. I will keep on ordering with this new milkman that we actually already had in the 70s. So a lot of this behavior will be here to stay. We do know if you supply food service, you have a problem. If you supply retail, you're in better shape. These things we do simply know. What obviously happens is that in some of the businesses that are in trouble, there are subsidies, there are grants, there's the furlough schedule, all sort of things. And they've been given, if you like, by the taxpayers 3-4 months to sort of restructure and look at the business and say, how do we want to act in the future? And it sort of seems that they're caught like rabbits in headlamps, that there is some sort of inertia there because I don't really see people working on the business. They're all working in the business. Day to day, try to survive, and they do, and that's very important because without survival today, there is no tomorrow. But it really becomes time. They're rather working in the business, they work on the business. How do we want the business to look like going forward? And that is the new action that we're looking for. And it appears that in many cases, it hasn't really started yet. And hopefully we can, in this discussion, try to understand why that is and what we might be able to do about it.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. That's very succinct. I think you talked a bit about changes in habits and 66 days and not, the online versus offline. I think there's some other challenges. We talked, through another guy on this call about the difference between Welling and Hatfield and Watford, John Lewis. One is going to shut and the other one isn't. And we've done quite a lot of retail turnaround where actually it's got bugger all to do with online versus online. It's far more to do with, complete rethink of the range, because there are some sectors, and particularly, the lower end demographic who have simply stopped buying stuff that they haven't needed to buy, for example. I mean, how do you see some of the fundamental buying behaviours changing in the sort of food sector? What are you seeing there in the more fundamental, take away the online versus offline?
Yeah, no, okay, forget about the online, offline, although obviously it is relevant because there is also a relationship with demographics, but we can park that for a second. I think in general, the amount of calories consumed pre-COVID and post-COVID will be the same, right? We still buy, 2 breads a week or, milk or whatever it is. Doesn't really matter. But we will go less out of home and we buy more retail. And within retail, we change from channels. Because if we go to retail, the proposition has to be right. And whether that is the range or it's the value proposition, it doesn't really matter, but it has to be right. And if you look now in the market, we see a couple of developments. We see the discounters growing, in particular the German discounters, Lidl and Aldi. We do know that we will have a lot of people unemployed, and therefore a lot of people will be cash strapped, and they will look at price and value, and they will go to the German discounters. In Germany, together these two have 50% market share. In the UK, just over 10. So there is plenty of space, if you like, to grow for these German discounters, and they will be successful. I'm convinced. At the same time, a lot of other people, maybe more the affluent people, maybe more people that live in the cities or whatever, they tend to go more now to the local supermarkets, smaller corner stores. During COVID, the local butcher, the local bakery, they all have developed all sort of services, if you like, but the home delivery, but they have helped, in fact, the people sort of getting through these 4 months. People have also discovered that shopping experience is far more attractive than waiting in a queue for a checkout at a retailer. So the traditional big four or big five will be stuck in the middle, where people that look at price will go to the discounters. People that look for something extra, service, quality, provenance, you name it, doesn't really matter. They will go to different outlets. And I do believe that if the big 4 or 5 do not change their proposition, although they did very well over the lockdown period, longer term, they will actually lose out. And there are many, many ways in terms of new action. One idea, for instance, that it just sort of played off with the chairman of one of these larger retail chains the other day, was how do you manage queues, right? Because pre-COVID, you went to the store, it was busy, maybe products were not on the shelf, but by the time you had your basket full, you would go to the checkout, you would have to wait. During COVID, you had to wait outside, but once you were in the store, the experience was quite pleasant because, there were not people pushing and running you over, and then you went to the checkout and it was actually your turn as well. So your total shopping time wasn't really different, but the moment of waiting in the queue was no longer in the store, but outside of the store. And that could be a new action. You could actually say as a retailer, why can't, if that was a pleasant experience, why can't we capitalize on that? Why can't we have a system where people wait before they go into the store in some sort of a queue environment? We make it pleasant. We hire completely different people. We don't want retail people for that. We hire people from Disney. They are the world experts on how to manage queues, how to keep people entertained in queues. These are the people you hire in the boards, and you set up a completely new shopping experience. I don't see anything like that. I don't say that this is the best example in the world, but I think it's a clear example. And what you don't see is these type of actions. What you do see is, Marks and Spencer's the other day, we fire 1,000 people. Yeah, that's probably a good thing to do, and you might have to do that. I don't pretend that I know better than the people over there. But at the same time, if you save the company today, you still have no reason for existence tomorrow. So you have to work also on the business and not just today in the business. And this sort of new action is what we are looking for. That's an example.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. And so finally, I guess one of the things that surprised me about the food supply chain is the quantity of food that went in B2B as opposed to B2C. And it's a lot, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's somewhere like 30 to 40% actually is B2B. Is that, which all of a sudden had to go B2C because the same people had to be fed. It didn't go to restaurants and whatever else they might have done.
Yeah.
And there's another shift which we've picked up through these calls, which is localization. So quite a few local suppliers, rather than having sourcing done centrally and screwing the business, to have more of a local focus to give people what they want locally. Have you seen those sorts of shifts as well?
Yeah, no, it's correct. If you look at spending out of home and retail pre-COVID, it was roughly 50-50.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you go to a restaurant, the meal is more expensive than if you cook it at home. So what the volumes that you quote there is probably on average, they're actually quite accurate. But that's also one of those behaviors that we therefore will see change, because people would go out of home or they would buy ready meals, doesn't really matter. But now they were forced to make a meal themselves, a fresh meal at home. So what I've learned is I can do it. It's not that difficult. It's tasty. It's far cheaper. It was a nice experience with my family, with my kids or whatever. Yeah. And they've done this now for weeks, for months. They're not going to change that anymore. They will keep on doing it. If there's something you like and something that suits you, there is no reason to. And we have, educated the people to to make these meals at home. And that's exactly the shift from out of home, if you like, towards retail-driven at-home consumption, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, thanks. And just one last question actually comes to mind is, I think one of the interesting challenges is around taking the right actions as opposed to assuming that the habits are correct. There's clearly a short-term thing, and I guess some people are wishing COVID might go away. But actually, what do you see any shifts in the supply chain which might need to be undone? I say when things, I don't believe things will go back to normal personally, but do you see things? Some decisions might need to be undone after those habitual things.
Well, there will definitely be a new order, if you like. What we have seen now is that people that have supplied out-of-home outlets have actually supported retail to fill the shelves. So, for instance, Brakes Food Service, which is a wholesaler, traditional wholesaler with depots and trucks that deliver their food to out-of-home, be it commercial catering or institutional catering outlets to bring those goods. They have, for instance, teamed up with Sainsbury's and have delivered products that were eventually on the Sainsbury's shelves. These sort of things are no longer needed, of course, in the future. So that was a short-term good activity, actually, I think, from both companies. But eventually that will disappear again. If I look at the business where I'm a chairman, which is a beef slaughter company, that company was actually designed in terms of product mix and customer mix to selling hindquarters, where you take the steaks, to high-end restaurants via the London meat market. Sort of 80% food service driven and 80% quality cuts from cattle. Within 2 weeks, both the customer mix as well as the product mix have changed. So a lot of the product actually ended up to the consumer, no longer via restaurants because that trade was dead, but via retail. And because the consumers actually wanted to stock minced meat and burgers and sausages rather than expensive steaks, you also saw that a lot of the hindquarters actually turned into products that traditionally are made from the forequarters, which is lower value. So within 2 weeks, that complete business model has changed from hindquarters out of home to forequarters type of products in retail. It's not sustainable because there is no margin. So that has to be partly changed and corrected again as soon as it's a slightly more normal or out-of-home consumption will rebound a bit. It will not rebound completely. 30% of the outlets, restaurants, outlet will disappear, will not come back. So there will be a permanent, rebalance, if you like, compared to pre-COVID. But obviously there will be a new balance where there is room for out-of-home consumption as well. But that's unsustainable, so that supplier will have to change its processes and its concept again. Similar to Brakes and Sainsbury will not continue that sort of cooperation. So there will be a lot of things that have been done short term. Some good, some bad, but I think on balance we did quite well as an industry. But a lot of that will be undone. A lot of people will come back after the furlough period. They're not needed, so they will be made redundant, unfortunately. A lot of stuff actually that people had planned in the budgets, if you like, budgets that were made in October, November last year. That it will not happen because who knew in October, November last year that there would be COVID, and that's one of these new actions as well. I think planning, budgeting, it will all be different going forward. It will be rolling 3 months with scenarios and no longer taking decisions today that actually have been taken a year ago. That is, and I think we have had conversations similar to that the other week as well in this forum. It will definitely change. And we will have a environment, and it's for the food supply chain, but it's probably for all, where it's we have to be more agile. We have to change all the time. I think the companies actually need permanent employers and permanent leadership, but with an interim mindset that can change. Every 3 months, every 6 months, because it will no longer be year after year after year. The same old. If you, it will simply not work. So we need to come to rolling 3 months forecasts. We will maybe work more with scenarios. But people said, for instance, you could not predict COVID. No, you could not predict COVID. Why? Because businessmen have a difficulty, to predict these sort of, wild scenarios, if you like. But that does mean that we need diversity of thought. It does mean that on the board, for instance, we need to hire, writers. There have been plenty of books about pandemics or, whatever. So there are people actually out there who can imagine those things to happen. It's just us business people that can't. But there are other people that we have so far maybe not appreciated in our environment that we could actually bring in the board. Because if I have a writer in my boardroom and said, this is the plan, but what could happen? He comes up maybe with 5, 6 scenarios that could be well valid. There were books, there were films. this is something you can't predict, but you can come up with certain scenarios. And if someone challenges you, what if there is a pandemic? Are we ready for that? What are our process? What is going to happen? What will be triggered? Nobody had that scenario in the boardroom, and we should. This is not going away.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. That's a really great start. So just to respond on a couple of those points, sharing some of our experience. I think when I think back to there's a couple of things that occurred to me in the last week. It's interesting how quickly these things move on. The 200 companies that we've turned around basically got stuck because their internal thinking got misaligned with the challenge. And people, and it's really an internal dialogue issue. And to quote George Orwell, of all people, he says that present chaos is connected with the decay of language. And I think that's a pretty good description of what goes on. That said, the market was relatively normal. And I think some of the challenges that you've just described in terms of inertia have been leaving the rest of the businesses pretty much just carrying on with a good tailwind, with really not challenging each other. And I think that there's been a really clear shift that we either decide to accept, or which is quite dramatic. And I'll try to describe it the way we've picked it up at the call, which is intimacy with each other. Right, there's been a whole new level of intimacy in terms of interaction. Also, this is also the basis of profits, and so we've rediscovered connection. There are some major buying shifts which you've touched on, Tom, just then, but it's also about doing the right thing. And the bottom line is sort of profit and relationships, I think, are the center of this whole situation. So I think the reality check with this is actually, given what's taken place, are new actions being taken? And if so, what is stopping us from taking new action? And I think we've got a new level of complexity which has been added onto this, which is external dialogue has now got misaligned at governmental level. So we've got the government talking about bounce back and all this sort of stuff. And if you think through the threats, there are, on our last call, we counted up 5. Actually, when I thought that through, there are actually 7, and these are major threats. Okay, so I'm not trying to talk it up, but I think it's very important that in all of this we think through, and most of those land in October, in part, which is the reduction of the furlough scheme. There's a whole raft of things which I won't repeat, but it's vital as leaders we consider this and the implications of these things to stay ahead. I think the fact we're not doing the right things, I think we've created what I describe as being bullshit farms, to be quite frank. So I think we've got, George Orwell describes this as political language which makes lies sound truthful. Yeah. And what do I mean by that? Bounce back is one of those. People talk about the market and the customer demand returning, which, as you just said, Ton, is unlikely in its current shape or form for a whole variety of reasons. Which is just sloppy language. People are still talking about tech is the future, and tech does have a place, but it's certainly not the future. In fact, it's reducing profits quite dramatically and service and differentiation. And there's a whole raft of stuff which I won't bore you around, ethics of AI, which is fundamentally fraudulent when you consider. It's the biggest paradox, and yet we've got whole people talking about this utter nonsense. So that's what I describe as being the sort of bullshit farms which sit around this misalignment. And so the corollary to this is, what does good look like? I think we're talking, the analogy I like, and I think it holds sense at the moment, is a jazz band. So it's improvising, it's got intimate relationships with customers, it's picking up all the information that's around, it's adjusting real time. You were talking 3 to 6 month window. I totally agree in terms of some of the bigger, but actually I think it's more immediate than that, Ton. It's about starting to look at the John Lewis situation, Welwyn Garden and Watford, from a white sheet of paper and keeping it blank, just like the jazz band, because the jazz band doesn't have any music. It doesn't have a script. It adjusts to suit the customer. And also, we're not talking about change. We shouldn't talk about change. We're talking about fluidity, because we're talking from a blank sheet of paper. So it's just about responding. And when new members join this team, you talked about writers, and I think that's great in terms of true diversity. We actually adjust the music to suit, rather than just get them to fit in this stupid culture we've created. So there's a lot of talk around culture and fit, and it's just nonsense. I think we've really got to get to a place of real openness and thinking. And because in that situation you're responding to the customer live, there's actually no room for bullshit, because you get found out, and actually a product doesn't sell or something doesn't work, and you've got to fix it, and you've got this team which is automatically adjusting. I think the big challenge with all of this, though, is something called pride, right? And the big problem with pride, and this is something that happens with businesses but gets successful, is there's no contrition, right? There's no acceptance of fault. And that is a major issue. And around that, there's a lot of intellectual snobbery. Like, Tom, you might think I know better than you, or David might think he knows better than me, and all that sort of intellectual stuff going in our heads, which is a big challenge. And I think we tend to excuse ourselves for, making exceptions for ourselves, when in fact we should hold each other to account. So I think this is actually quite subtle. Some of the justifications people are saying, online isn't perfection, but then going on to justify, although this will improve. These sorts of, and this is what the way our dialogue takes place. We're not addressing the issue, and this is all manifestation of pride, or in fact just sloppy language like aerospace. Debt to shore up a balance sheet. Debt does not shore up a balance sheet; it drives it insolvent, right? Particularly if you can't repay it. So, very sloppy language. And I think it's important as well, knee-jerk reactions to this. We have to think this through properly. And I certainly don't suggest that I've got the answer. You talked about this thing about entertaining people in the queue. David's thing was selling women's underwear in M&S, which I think, everybody to their own, I'd say, David, on that one. But whatever that solution is, we've got to make sure it's rounded and it's got holds water for at least a period of time, and we test it properly. So I think the other side of this is also around innovation. It also comes through the business model. So if you take something like Rolls-Royce is really badly screwed, because I talked originally about cash. Rolls-Royce, most of its revenue is switched from selling engines to actually revenue from long-haul engines. And can you imagine anything worse about the utilization, your utilization, your revenue being based on the usage of long-haul engines, not the so there's no revenue coming in, so their revenue stopped. And so the challenge is for all businesses, I think, is how you're going to create cash from where you are. So you've got to change that revenue model. And you, Tom, were talking about that business that was supplying your meat unprofitably. Now, the challenge is how can you make cash doing those things and not to fudge it? Because I think there's, and I think a lot of this is around the thinking in organisations and really dramatic shifts. So you might be selling bits of meat, but the business model might well need to change. So an example of this was actually around a business that I've been working with recently and discussing some of the thinking in this business, which was sort of some of the statements. So stasis, 3 statements around stasis: good shape across all verticals, watch the intellectual pride, right? Fighting for our lives. Another word, we are in decent shape. So really defensive, proud statements. But you look at the business model, heavily reliant on invoice finance. Invoice finance is one of the October clangers. It will get hit very hard for a variety of reasons. And I think we've got to create businesses with no external funding and be able to stand on your own 2 feet, which means shifting in this particular business, your credit terms from 90 days to 10 days, and managing that on a weekly basis, and keeping that dialogue very close and being very clear about your core business. And so that creates a whole new level of rigor, because a lot of people are saying, well, we're fudging it with more debt, which is a big issue. And again, in this business, the old past, proudly saying we're getting back to paying bonuses. Actually, that is a disastrous statement, because it's about we've got to generate cash pots, because cash gives you time. We've got to generate cash to give us time without acquiring debt from other places. So I think there's some of the learning points that, from our turnarounds. I think that specifically shifts in the thinking, much more resourceful, much more tighter relationships with clients. And the big problem with pride, though, is that we don't ever recognize it's our fault, right? And that creates deadlock. The other side of this is also it creates blindness. And there is a lot of blindness in this situation that requires us to shine lights in situations, and we can't do that at an individual level. We do this at a team level, because it's only by taking a rounded situation and increasing the dialogue to get this jazz band working. Because let's face it, they might not be playing the right tune, but you've got the players. So you get the dialogue, get everything to the surface, and then really find out what's going on and actually how to clear out and then take these new actions. So to pretty much clear all the stuff out, all the roadblocks out, and then remove the music, keep the script really clean. And interesting enough, I mean, this morning, before this call, I go out for a cycle ride. I go and climb some big mountains. Oddly enough, where I live in Surrey, there's some big hills you can climb. And I stop in this cafe, which has started actually in COVID-19, and it's got off to a great start. And I go and have a coffee down there. But I'm just noticing that pride is creeping into this place. They're getting a bit complacent. They've been extraordinarily successful. Two great guys. So this is a moving feast. So I think we've got to create the dialogue between us, which is straightforward, honest, to hold each other to account, to really, enable us to not to talk about agile, but just clean white sheet of paper and this fluidity to take action. So we do this in a day. So and the way we do this, you talked about changing habits. We do this, Tom, by shining a light into different perspectives to enable people to take new action. And if there's a team of 8 people, you take 96 different actions in one day. And I or my member of my team will make sure that happens. And it's not an aggressive process. It's a very enlightening process because it resets relationships. It gets the dialogue up, and you then remove all of these perceptions of what do you think about David or Tom or the other David or whoever. It gets all of that stuff out on the table. We then have got a relationship which is robust, and it enables us to do this stuff. So I'm pretty clear about what part of this solution is. I'm not proud enough to think we're the whole thing, but got a pretty good idea of some of the underlying factors. So that's what I'd like to share. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Tom, in terms of anything you agree or disagree with, any questions you'd like to ask?
Well, I think I like that analogy with the jazz band, as a matter of fact, because as we said earlier before, since a lot of people or leadership and chairmen and group CEOs don't really know what the music is that needs to be played, they also do not make any attempt to get the right jazz players and the right band together. Yeah. And I think that's wrong, because it is these players in the end that help you to compose, or if you like, or to play that music. So I think it's actually time to get people in, the right type of people that can handle adversity and change and agility and all these terminology, if you like, and then together be able to to create some great music, rather than waiting for someone giving you a music sheet and say, okay, now we know what needs to be played and we're going to find the players. And it is remarkable because prior to COVID, every company had a strategy. And every company had a leadership team. And you have to assume that that leadership team was the appropriate team to execute that particular strategy. What we also know is now, fast forward 4 or 5 months, that post-COVID, all those strategies have changed or need to change. That implies that also these leadership teams need to go to some sort of change, or maybe complete, maybe partially, it doesn't really matter. Well, I look at the Financial Times every morning to see which chairman stood up and actually replaced his leadership team. Hasn't happened so far. Yeah. So we still have all these old bands, all these bands that can play over a music sheet, but unfortunately we don't have your jazz combos or jazz ensembles that can actually now play, and change and for whatever comes up. And I think that needs to happen, and it needs to happen relatively quick, because companies that do not make that change will find themselves at a disadvantage going forward.
Yeah. And I think, what's your view of the skills? I touched on some of the skills and the shifts, and largely it's around, in my view, around taking new action and learning from that on the job. And this is not about being prescriptive, by the way. It's very much self-taught. So it's about all of us stepping into a new place and taking new action. What's your view, Ton, in terms of the sort of skills that's required to make that jazz band working properly?
Well, I think it's attitude to a certain extent, that to step away from pride, as you've mentioned earlier. So if you have taken a position, you should be able to leave that position behind because someone else knows better, or there's new insight, or something has happened. Yeah. So that pride element, I think, is quite important. As we said earlier, it is important that you have diversity and whether that is gender or race or I think it's in the end it all comes down to diversity of thought. So if you have a diverse team and those team members don't think they're more important than the other, but they all swallow their pride, if you like, and are willing to listen to each other's arguments and then together come to something beautiful, then I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. I don't believe in tremendous specific skill sets, and most of the skills are transferable in business anyhow. Of course, 80%, 90% of the businesses follow the same type of processes.
Yeah.
You buy goods, you add value, and you sell them again. I mean, that is not that difficult to grasp.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Tom. It's really good. So, Mr. Allen, what are your thoughts? We're a bit tight on time.
Well, we're very tight on time, so let me just give one thought, and then I'll read some questions out. I saw this morning that 3 or 4 of the very biggest tech executives in America have been called in front of Congress. Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, the traditional group. This is all happening sort of today and tomorrow. And the interesting thing was, why is Bill Gates helping these guys? And they asked him, and he said, well, several years ago, I had an opportunity to speak in front of the Congress and tell them about Microsoft. And I told them that they should be pretty damn thankful that they've got Microsoft. We do almost everything that runs their government for them. We've hired more than 100,000 Americans to do all kinds of things. And he said, basically, you people should be thanking us for what we've done for you. And he said, within 60 days, the Justice Department decided that I was a monopoly. They sued Microsoft and won and did this. They shifted to Google for a lot of their stuff. And I had to lose my job. So I thought that was pretty interesting that he would say that as a way he might be able to contribute to what these guys are doing. So 2 questions from Nick Brown. The first one is about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He's getting into the food distribution business. What do you think about that?
What was the question, Dave? I couldn't hear. Can you speak up a bit? I can't hear.
Jeff Bezos is getting into the food distribution business. What do you think about that, Tom?
I think it's a massive threat. Obviously, there's no reason why they are not able to compete with any of the retailers at the moment in the UK in particular. But they
have a second question behind that, which
will have to offer.
Will Amazon be able to source locally? Will Amazon be able to source locally? What do you think?
Yeah, of course they will be. They will be able to source anywhere like anyone else, because from the procurement perspective, they will not be very different. What they would have to have is a logistical service of people going to all these different stores, right? You can't, if you sell food or fresh, you can't really rely on the way they operate right now. So I would think they will probably do an acquisition in order to get their logistics straight, and the rest is procurement, and they have a platform to reach the consumers directly. It is not necessarily a different proposition than Tesco online or Sainsbury online or anyone else. So if they want to win that race, they need to come up with something new. And I don't know what that new could be, but obviously they have the financial power. They have their online engines to guess what people would like to consume and would like to buy. So it will be. They will definitely take share. Whether that what they do today, but then with food, is enough to really to compete and be the winner in the market. I don't think so. They really have to come up with as we said earlier, new ideas, new actions. But I would definitely fear them coming in the market. Would I be a retailer in the UK and not have a clear proposition? I wouldn't fear if I would be Lidl or Aldi. I wouldn't fear if I would be the bakery just around the corner with my artisanal nice products that I sell to an affluent area. But for the guys stuck in the middle, this will be an additional competitive force to reckon.
Yeah, I just add something to that. There's a bullshit farm here, which is around online food retail. Okay, if you look at the accounts of Ocado, they lose a stupid amount of money because of the tech infrastructure, and retail margins are much tighter. The 35% versus 48% roughly, food retail versus normal retail, and food retailers are reliant on a store base. So no, the profitable ones are the guys with the stores. They are not the online retailers. So I think when Amazon, if they took a tough look at their profitability and ring fence their online food business, they'd make no money. In fact, I'm bloody sure of that. And Ocado certainly is a business, in my view, which should be shut because it's talking about tech, but actually it's created a loss-making business model, and it's very difficult to supply food profitably without a big store. The other thing is the sustainability of it, burning a lot of diesel, shipping stuff around in smaller quantities, big implications, unless people are willing to pay more money for the convenience. So I don't know, there's a bullshit farm there as well.
Well, actually, it's an interesting thing that you've mentioned, unless people are willing to pay for the convenience. Because in general, online is a convenience proposition. You can sit in your chair and look, through a catalog and buy whatever you like. And if you receive it and doesn't fit, you send it back or whatever. So it's actually a service that has been provided. But somehow it's always cheaper. And it doesn't really make sense that you sell your added value product for a lower price.
Yeah, and there's a mantra there, Tom. This is what I'm talking about in terms of the decay of language. The decay of language there is that tech, a lot of businesses talk about disruption. What they mean is giving stuff away. It's not disruptive, it's just stupid. Give me a bonfire of cash, I can burn your cash for you. Give me Revolut, I'll burn your cash. Give me Ocado, I'll burn your cash. It's not clever, it's stupid. Anyway.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm 100% on board with your Ocado analysis, in all fairness, because Ocado actually, in the last couple, periods did quite well.
I know. Look at the accounts. We'll talk about it offline.
We'll see where that end up.
Detail. It's in the detail. I'm happy to talk about that separately, but it's interesting. The whole thing's interesting. Anyway, I'm not saying right, by the way. I'm just being a little bit jazz. I'm just being a bit jazz bandy.
That's for next time.
And speaking of jazz bands, Jens Henson has not really asked a question, but made a comment that, if we try out new actions and find out new ways of working, we can come to a much better place because of COVID. So the question, Tom, for your view was, was the eventual outcome of COVID a good thing for us?
In general?
Yeah.
Well,
aside from the people dying, all that.
Of course. No, I think of course there are some upsides of COVID as well. I mean, people have reinvented. If you talk for instance, food, the quality of food and the importance of food, they have reinvented how important it is and relearned how important it is to be with family and close ties of people. So there are quite a few positives. There are people that have learned new skills. There are, people became more healthy. But on balance, we could have done without it. I mean, we've destroyed the economy for the next 2 decades. I'm not very pleased with that. People have indeed died, as you just earlier said. We will probably have a lot of anxiety, depression. We might have people, committing suicide. People that just have gone from university, learned a lot and will not find a job. So I think on balance, it's definitely not a positive event. Also not 5 or 10 or 20 years when we look back at it. But there will be definitely some positive outcomes as well, no doubt.
Yeah, I'll just add something to that. I think it hasn't, the monkey has not landed. October, this will get very nasty. So I'm talking about pride. If people continue being proud and doing nothing, there's a serious problem, and they simply will not be able to cope, both business or psychologically. So I think this hasn't even started. I do think, though, that this had to happen. Something had to bring the party to a halt, because we're trashing the planet with the wind behind us for far too long. It's just not sustainable. If you look at the graph of GDP for the whole of eternity, it's gone vertical at 2000. And consumption of everything's gone vertical. That line cannot carry on, and it's exponential. So it can't carry on. So this party had to come to an end. So it's a nasty wake-up call, but it's been going on for 40 years. It's nothing new. People have been talking about trashing the planet. You were talking about the writers for 40 years. The oil industry has created this decay of language that George Orwell's talking about, which is fudge this thing for 40 years. But we've known about sustainability for 40 years. Anyway, that was grim, wasn't it? So, David, David,
we're way out of time.
I know. So, would you just wrap up,
gonna,
David? Just wrap up, anyway.
So you very quickly and wrap up, Tom. First of all, we really appreciate you being here, and you brought up some really good. I like the hunk, chunk, and drunk idea. That's really good. That's made all of our attendees go and think, am I a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk? You know, how's that working? Because you brought up the whole issue of it's distilled down things to a very small group of people, and changes in habits. Habits have been forcibly changed because of this COVID situation, and that is a very, very interesting approach to looking at how we go forward from here. So I think it's been very good, and we certainly really appreciate your your time here. So so we better sign off and say thank you and have a really great day. Yeah.
Fantastic, Tom. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Yeah. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.